Arendor had always been a peaceful world, nestled in the depths of the galaxy, far from the dangers and chaos of intergalactic wars. The human colony had thrived here for centuries, its people enjoying prosperity and harmony. Each decade, the entire colony came together to celebrate their achievements, not only as a people, but also as a symbol of humanity's rise across the stars. This year's ceremony was especially important. The leaders of the colony had decided to mark the 10th anniversary of their peaceful victory against the Zorith, an alien race that had threatened their very existence. On this special day, the streets of Arendor were adorned with banners and shimmering lights. People from all walks of life filled the city's vast plaza, their faces bright with excitement and joy. The air was filled with music, the sound of laughter and the sweet fragrance of blooming flowers from the surrounding fields. The ceremony was to be held in the Grand Amphitheater, an enormous structure carved into the side of a mountain, offering a breathtaking view of the endless skies above. Captain Alara Hayes stood near the entrance of the amphitheater, gazing at the scene in front of her. She had returned to Arendor after years of being stationed on the frontier of human space. Her heart swelled with pride as she saw the smiling faces of her people. She had played a significant role in the victory against the Zorith, leading her fleet in the decisive battle that had turned the tide of the war. Her name had become a symbol of hope and strength for the colony, and today she was the guest of honor. Alara's uniform, adorned with medals and ribbons, shimmered in the sunlight as she made her way to the stage. The crowd cheered and the sound of clapping filled the air. It was the first time in years that she had returned home, and the warmth of the reception made her feel as if all the hardships of the past had been worth it. The ceremony began with the ceremonial lighting of the Peace Beacon, a massive structure that stood at the center of the amphitheater. The beacon had been created to symbolize humanity's commitment to peace and unity. As the flame of peace flickered to life, the crowd erupted into applause, and Alara felt a sense of relief wash over her. For once, there were no battles to fight, no wars to wage. The people of Arendor had earned their peace. As the ceremony continued, Alara's mind wandered, thinking of the many soldiers who had fought and died for this moment. The Zorith War had been brutal, and countless lives had been lost. She remembered the faces of those who had given everything to ensure humanity's survival. Their sacrifices were not forgotten, and Alara made a silent vow to honor their memory, no matter how peaceful the days ahead seemed. Later in the evening, after the speeches and celebrations had ended, Alara stood at the edge of the amphitheater overlooking the city. The stars above twinkled brightly, casting a gentle light over the landscape. Arendor's peaceful nature seemed to extend beyond the planet, all the way into the heavens. It was hard to believe that just a few years ago, this very place had been on the brink of destruction. The memory of the Zorith invasion still lingered in her mind. How the enemy had come from the depths of space, attacking without warning, their technology far superior to anything humanity had at the time. But now, that threat was gone, and the people of Arendor had rebuilt, stronger and more unified than ever before. The future seemed bright, filled with endless possibilities. As Alara gazed up at the sky, a small smile tugged at her lips. For a brief moment, she allowed herself to believe that peace could last forever, but deep down, a faint, unshakable feeling nagged at her. Something was not quite right. It was a feeling she could not ignore. The next day, the stars would burn. As the sun rose the following morning, a strange sense of unease gripped the colony. The air was still, too still. People went about their routines, unaware that the peaceful night would soon be shattered. Alara had just returned to her quarters when a series of urgent messages arrived, each one more troubling than the last. Reports from the colony's outer stations confirmed that the skies above had changed overnight. The stars that had once glittered so brightly in the firmament were now dim, faint, almost invisible. The planetary sensors registered an anomaly. An unknown force was interfering with the local space-time fabric, causing the stars to flicker and fade. It was as though something was blocking them from view, creating a dark void in the cosmos. Alara immediately called for a briefing with her officers. In the conference room, the mood was tense. Commander Joran, her trusted second-in-command, looked at her with a worried expression. "Captain, we've never seen anything like this before. The fleet's scanners can't detect anything beyond the outer reaches of the system. It's as if the stars themselves are being erased." "What do you mean, erased?" Alara asked, her voice sharp. We've checked every possible angle, Captain. There's no natural explanation for this. Something is actively blocking our view of the stars, and the deeper we scan, the more distorted the data becomes. It's almost as if someone doesn't want us to see what's out there, Joran replied. Ilara frowned, her mind racing. Could it be an attack? Are the Zorith back? I don't think it's the Zorith, Captain. Their technology is nowhere near advanced enough to affect the stars like this. This is something else. Something we've never encountered, Joran said. Ilara felt the weight of the situation press down on her. The people of Arendor had never known a threat like this. They had fought hard to achieve peace, and now it seemed that peace was slipping away, slipping into darkness. Suddenly, an alarm blared across the station. The view outside the window turned a deep, ominous black. The faintest flicker of light danced across the horizon. No, not a flicker. A massive shadow was passing through the stars. It moved so quickly that no one could track its origin. Report, Ilara barked. The response came in a rushed, panicked voice. Captain, we're detecting enormous ships, too large to be human-made. They're coming from the dark zone. Shut down all non-essential systems. I want full scans on that fleet now, Ilara ordered, her voice steady despite the growing fear in her chest. The enormity of the threat was becoming clear. The shadow that had blocked the stars was not just an anomaly, it was an invasion. The ships were unlike anything humanity had ever seen, sleek, elegant, and far more advanced than their own. These beings, whoever they were, had the power to manipulate space itself, and now they had come to Arendor. Ilara stood, her fists clenched. Prepare the fleet for battle. We're not going to let them take this world without a fight. But as she turned to leave, she couldn't shake the nagging feeling in her mind, the feeling that this was just the beginning of something far worse. The sun rose reluctantly the morning after the ceremony, its light weak and uncertain. The atmosphere of Arendor had shifted overnight. Something was wrong. The people of the colony began their daily routines, unaware of the unseen change that had taken place while they slept. Captain Ilara Hayes stood on the balcony of her quarters, staring out into the vast expanse of space. The stars were missing, or rather they were fading. Arendor had always prided itself on its crystal-clear view of the cosmos, where the stars shone brightly even during the day. But now the night sky was nothing more than a vast, empty void. The familiar twinkling of distant stars had been replaced by a black emptiness. She could feel the change deep in her bones. There was something unnatural about this disappearance, something far more dangerous than any storm or natural disaster. It was the feeling of a predator lurking in the shadows waiting to strike. Ilara had faced her fair share of enemies over the years, but this was different. This wasn't just a threat from within the galaxy. It felt like an attack on reality itself. The peaceful hum of the colony was replaced by whispers of concern. People began to notice the strange darkness overhead. They checked their star maps, only to find that the familiar constellations they had relied on for centuries were gone. There was no explanation for it. The planet's scanners couldn't detect anything beyond the edge of the system. The universe had become a blank canvas. Inside the command center, the tension was palpable. Ilara met with Commander Joran and the senior officers to assess the situation. They sat around a large holographic table, where reports from all over the colony flashed across the screen. Everything was normal on the surface except for the sky. No one could explain it. Captain, we've tried everything, Joran said, rubbing his temples. The data we've collected is almost alien. We're not detecting any familiar celestial bodies. It's like the stars themselves have been erased from existence. Or what do you mean, erased? Ilara asked, her voice low with concern. You're saying that the stars are physically gone? I don't think they're gone, Captain. I think something has cloaked them, hidden them from our sight, Joran replied, his face grim. And not just from our scanners. I've tried to communicate with our deep space probes, but they're getting nothing either. There's a massive interference field blocking all signals. It's almost like the stars have vanished. Ilara clenched her jaw, frustration bubbling inside her. This can't be a coincidence. Yesterday we celebrated our victory. Today the stars are gone and something out there is blocking us from seeing what's coming. Her instincts were on edge. The people of Arendor had worked too hard, sacrificed too much, to be blindsided by something they couldn't even see. She had faced down the Zorith, but this was something else. A threat that operated in the dark, in the unknown. A sudden flash of light interrupted her thoughts. and the entire room turned to the massive viewport. For a split second, the stars seemed to shimmer back into view, but then, just as quickly, they faded once more, as if a shadow had swallowed them whole. It was brief, almost imperceptible, but enough to send a shiver down Ilara's spine. She had seen it, the unmistakable sign that something immense was moving in their direction, a force that could swallow light itself. "Commander," Ilara said sharply, her voice hard as steel, "get me a full sweep of the system. No more playing it safe. I want every possible angle covered, every sensor array activated. We need to know what we're up against now." Joran nodded without hesitation. "Yes, Captain. I'll notify the fleet. We'll have the scans running within minutes." Ilara turned away from the viewport, her mind racing. The Zorath threat had been difficult enough to handle, but they had been a known enemy with known tactics. This was something different. This was something that had remained hidden, lurking just outside their reach. And now, it was beginning to make its move. The hours passed slowly as Ilara and her team worked tirelessly to uncover the truth behind the mysterious darkness. The commander had ordered all personnel to stay on high alert, and a sense of unease spread through the colony. People whispered in the streets, looking up at the black sky, wondering what had happened to the stars. The quiet murmur of fear was palpable. Ilara stood at the command center's console, analyzing the data streaming in from the fleet. She had ordered every ship to scan the surrounding area, but the results were troubling. There was no sign of any enemy fleet, no sign of any recognizable signal or spacecraft, but the absence of the stars meant that something was out there, something with the power to manipulate the very fabric of space. "Captain, I have something?" Joran's voice broke through her thoughts. She turned toward him, her gaze sharp. "What is it?" "We've detected an energy signature, but it's..." "Strange," Joran said. "It doesn't match anything in our database. It's like it's bending space itself, making it impossible for our sensors to get a clear reading. But it's definitely coming from the dark zone, the area where the stars have disappeared." Ilara's heart skipped a beat. The dark zone, the very place that had once seemed like nothing more than empty space, was now at the center of all the chaos. She had a terrible feeling in her gut that the source of the disturbance was there waiting for them. "Keep tracking it," Ilara ordered. "We need to know where it's coming from and, more importantly, who or what is responsible." But as the seconds ticked by, something even more unsettling happened. The colony's power grid began to flicker. Lights dimmed across the city, and the hum of machinery stuttered. The entire planet seemed to groan under the weight of an invisible force. And then came the warning. Unidentified ships detected, no signal. "No communication." Ilara's blood ran cold. "Are you sure?" she demanded. "Yes, Captain. There are at least a dozen ships, and they're moving fast. It looks like they're headed straight for the colony." Her mind raced. The fleet was still not ready for battle, not yet. They hadn't been able to confirm the enemy's strength or numbers. And now here they were, approaching their home at full speed. "All hands, prepare for impact," Ilara said, her voice firm. "I want the fleet in the sky now. Full battle stations. We won't let them take our world without a fight." As Ilara hurried through the corridors of the command center, the sirens blared, and the warning lights flashed red. The colony was on high alert. Citizens hurried to shelters, and soldiers scrambled to their posts. Ilara knew that they couldn't afford to waste any more time. The enemy was coming, and they had to be ready. Within minutes, Ilara stood at the helm of her ship, the Courageous, her flagship. The crew worked quickly, securing all systems for launch. The massive vessel rumbled to life beneath her feet as the docking bay doors slowly opened. The dark void of space stretched before them, and Ilara's heart beat faster. She had led humanity through war before, but this felt different. This was an enemy that had been hiding in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. As the Courageous lifted into the sky, Ilara's mind raced. What kind of enemy could cloak themselves so completely? What kind of force had the power to turn the stars themselves into a distant memory? The answers were still out there, just beyond the edge of the system. But one thing was certain. The peace they had fought so hard for was slipping away, and a new war, one unlike any they had ever faced, was just beginning. And as Ilara looked up at the empty sky, she knew the darkness was only the beginning. The worst was yet to come. The tension that had gripped Arendor the previous day had only intensified. The dark zone where the stars had once burned so brightly was now the focal point of humanity's worst fears. Ilara stood at the command center aboard her flagship, the Courageous staring at the starless void in front of her. The darkness felt alive, stretching out into the universe like a great consuming black hole. The unknown ships, those enormous shadowy figures moving toward them, were growing closer with every passing moment. They were out there, just beyond the reach of their sensors, and they would soon arrive at the planet. Ilara had led her people through countless challenges, but this was unlike anything they had ever faced. Her mind raced, trying to piece together the puzzle. These ships were not like anything the humans had encountered before. They didn't communicate, and they didn't respond to any of the signals or probes humanity had sent out. They were simply there, silent, looming, and relentless. "We're about to enter their range, Captain," Commander Joran said, standing beside her at the control panel. "It's only a matter of time before they make their move." Ilara nodded grimly. The fleet had been in a state of readiness for hours, every ship prepared for an attack that no one fully understood. The soldiers aboard the Courageous and the other ships were experienced, but nothing could prepare them for this kind of enemy. The mystery of who or what these beings were and what they wanted haunted Ilara's thoughts. A soft beep interrupted her contemplation. One of the smaller scouts had made a breakthrough. "We've got a signal," the communications officer called out. "It's weak, but it's definitely coming from one of their ships." Ilara straightened, her attention snapping back to the monitor. The officer's fingers flew across the keys, trying to enhance the signal. Slowly, the image flickered into view. A massive ship so enormous that it seemed to stretch across the screen. Its surface was sleek and metallic, yet somehow it shimmered with an otherworldly glow. It had no visible weapons or markings, only a deep pulsating light at its core. "This is unlike anything we've seen," Joran muttered under his breath. Then came a voice. It wasn't in any language they recognized, but somehow it felt like it was speaking directly to their minds. The words were not spoken, but felt, as if the thoughts themselves were being transmitted through the void of space. "You are not the first to reach the stars, and you will not be the last." The voice, cold and unfeeling, reverberated through the command center. It wasn't a direct threat, but its meaning was unmistakable. The message was clear. The human race was not unique in its journey through the stars. And worse, their place in the cosmos was already decided by some other force. Ilara's chest tightened. What were they dealing with? Who were these beings that had the power to speak to them without words? And why were they so sure that humanity's time had come? "Send a reply," Ilara ordered, her voice steady despite the unease in her gut. "Ask who they are, what they want, and why they've come." But as the communications officer attempted to send a message back, the ship's system suddenly went haywire. Lights flickered and the hum of the engines cut out. The crew scrambled to maintain control. "Captain, we've lost communication," the officer reported, panic creeping into their voice. "We can't establish any sort of link. It's like they've blocked us." Ilara's eyes narrowed. "They've disabled our systems remotely." She turned to Joran, her face a mask of determination. "We need to find a way to communicate with them. They're not here just to intimidate. This is a warning. Something bigger is happening." Joran nodded, though his expression was clouded with concern. "It doesn't make sense, Captain. If they wanted to destroy us, they could have done it already. They've shown no aggression, just presence." Ilara clenched her fists. "We can't afford to take chances. Prepare the fleet for defensive maneuvers. If they won't communicate, we have to protect Arendor." The enemy ships had moved closer, their sleek, enormous forms blocking out the stars as they passed. There were dozens of them, each one more advanced than anything humanity had ever seen. They did not radiate the heat or energy that the human ships did. Instead, they seemed to exist outside the normal laws of physics, flickering in and out of visibility, like shadows cast by something much larger. The larger ships formed a ring around Arendor's moon, creating an invisible barrier that cut off any escape. They had the planet surrounded, and the very presence of the ships created an oppressive feeling, as though the universe itself was pressing down on the human race. Ilara paced back and forth in the command room, staring at the display of the enemy fleet. The ships had no identifiable markings, no insignia, no way to identify who they were or where they came from. It was as if they had appeared out of nowhere with no explanation, no warning. The humans had fought wars, faced invaders before, but this was something different. The comms officer spoke again, his voice trembling slightly. "Captain, we're receiving another transmission. this time from one of their ships directly above the planet. Ilara's heart skipped a beat. "Play it." The same voice from before echoed through the room. "You have shown strength, but strength alone will not save you. We have seen countless species like yours. You will either adapt or be erased." Ilara's mind raced. What was this? A warning? A declaration of war? But the way it was phrased, like they were being judged, evaluated, sent a chill through her. These beings weren't interested in a conventional fight. They were watching, observing, and determining the fate of humanity. And from the way their ships hovered above, she could sense that they had the power to destroy everything in an instant. Joran moved beside her, his expression grave. "Captain, if they wanted to destroy us, they would have done so already, but it's like they're waiting for something." Ilara took a deep breath, trying to think clearly. "They're not here to destroy us right away," she said slowly. "They're testing us. They want to see how we respond. They want to know if we're worth keeping around, or if we're just another species to be wiped out." "What do we do?" Joran asked. "We play their game," Ilara said, her voice cold with determination. "We show them that we're not just going to disappear quietly. If they think they can erase us, they're wrong. We'll fight. We'll show them the strength of the human spirit." Joran nodded. "Understood, Captain." Back on the surface of Arendor, the people were still unaware of the looming threat hanging above them. They had watched the stars disappear from the sky, but the true scale of what was happening was still unknown. There was a strange calm over the colony, as if everyone was waiting for something they didn't fully understand. They had heard rumors of enemy ships, of strange lights in the sky, but nothing concrete had emerged. But Ilara knew that time was running out. The longer the enemy remained above, the greater the risk that they would decide humanity wasn't worth saving. The fleet had to be ready, and Arendor's defenses had to be reinforced. "Joran," Ilara said, looking out the viewport at the black void where the stars once shone, "we don't know what they want, but we will fight for our home. We'll fight for every person on this planet. We'll make sure they know that humanity isn't just some passing species. We're here to stay." Joran stood beside her, his face set with resolve. "We'll stand with you, Captain." And in that moment, Ilara knew that no matter how unknown the enemy was, no matter how powerful their technology seemed, humanity's will to survive would be their greatest weapon. The darkness above them might block out the stars, but it couldn't dim the light of human determination. The darkness of the unknown fleet still loomed over Arendor. Days had passed since the alien ships had surrounded the planet, their massive forms blocking out the stars like shadows cast by something much greater than themselves. Ilara Hayes stood at the center of the command room aboard the Courageous, staring at the holographic display that showed the enemy fleet arrayed in orbit. The silence in the room was unnerving. The ships hung in space like cold, indifferent giants, their intentions unclear. Despite the eerie calm, the sense of urgency was overwhelming. The fleet had been on high alert for days, but the aliens, whatever they were, had made no move. No attack, no demand for surrender, just silence. Ilara couldn't shake the feeling that they were being observed, their every action and response carefully watched by an enemy whose true motives remained a mystery. But one thing was becoming clear. These beings were not interested in simple conquest. They were here for something much bigger. As the fleet commander paced in front of the table, her mind raced with the thought of how to protect her people. She had fought for the survival of humanity before, but now, faced with an enemy whose technology was beyond anything humans had ever seen, the situation was more dire than ever. "Captain, we've got a message coming in," came the voice of Joran, her trusted second-in-command. He was seated at the communication station, his fingers flying across the console. Ilara stopped, her heart skipping a beat. The brief flicker of hope she had been holding on to seemed to glow brighter for just a moment. "Play it," she commanded. A hologram flickered to life in front of her, and for a moment all she could see was static and distortion. Then the image cleared, revealing a figure standing in front of a dark, starless backdrop. The being was humanoid in shape, tall and elegant, with pale skin that seemed to glow faintly in the darkness. Its eyes were like pools of liquid silver shimmering with an unnatural light. "Humans." The figure spoke, its voice cold, yet strangely calm. "I am Threx, leader of the Vithari. We are the architects of the galaxy's balance. Your race has reached a point of advancement that we have witnessed countless times before. We have come to decide whether you are worthy of continuing your existence, or if you will become one of the many that have been erased. The voice echoed through the room, and Alara's fists clenched involuntarily. These beings, the Vithari, were not invaders in the traditional sense. They were something else. The calm certainty in Threx's voice made it clear. They saw themselves as the ultimate judges of life in the galaxy. They were not here to conquer. They were here to decide the fate of humanity. "We have watched your species for millennia," Threx continued, his tone unwavering. "Your survival in the stars, your ability to adapt, has earned you a place in the galaxy's history. But history is a tale of those who rise and fall. You will either evolve into something greater, or be extinguished as countless others have been." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving Alara in stunned silence. The Vithari were not here for war. They were here for something more sinister: judgment. Ilara's heart raced, her thoughts clouded with anger and fear. They had no right to decide the fate of humanity. They had no right to erase what her people had fought for. "Captain, we've been receiving reports from the resistance networks," Joran said, his voice a little less certain. "There are scattered groups across the galaxy that claim to have fought the Vithari before. They survived, and now they're reaching out to us." Ilara's eyes sharpened. "What do you mean they survived?" "They say that the Vithari have come before and not all species have been destroyed. Some managed to fight back to survive. These groups are the ones that have lived to tell the tale, and now they're offering us help." Ilara felt a flicker of hope. The thought of resistance, of a chance to fight back, stirred something deep inside her. She couldn't let her people simply give in to the Vithari's judgment. The galaxy wasn't theirs to control. Humanity had fought too hard, sacrificed too much to be wiped out by a race that saw them as nothing more than a footnote in the cosmos. "Get me in contact with them," Ilara ordered. "We can't fight this battle alone. If they have knowledge of the Vithari, we need to learn from them. We need to unite." Hours later, Ilara found herself in a secure communications room, speaking to the leaders of the resistance. The holographic images flickered to life, and several figures appeared before her. They were from different races, some human, some not, but their faces were marked with the weariness of those who had fought against overwhelming odds. "We've heard of you, Captain Hayes," said a tall human woman with dark hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. "We've been watching the situation on Arendor. The Vithari have made their move, but they're not invincible." "Who are you?" Ilara asked, her voice filled with urgency. "How do you know the Vithari? And why haven't we heard of you before?" "We are survivors," the woman said, her tone grim. "Our names don't matter. What matters is that we fought the Vithari before and we're still here. There's a reason for that. We know their weaknesses, their patterns. We know how to fight them." Ilara leaned forward, her curiosity piqued. "What do we need to do?" The woman's eyes darkened. "The Vithari see themselves as the keepers of cosmic balance. They eliminate those they deem unworthy, and they spare those who prove themselves. But they underestimate one thing: the will to fight, the spirit of a species determined to survive. That's what saved us, and that's what will save you too." Another figure, an alien with blue skin and 3 eyes, spoke up. "The Vithari use a special type of energy, something that bends the fabric of space. It's how they cloak their ships, how they disrupt communications. But we've found ways to counter it. If you disrupt their energy field, you can reveal their fleet. You'll be able to strike back." "Disrupt their energy field?" Ilara echoed. "How do we do that?" "We'll share the technology with you," the blue-skinned alien said. "But it's risky. You'll need to act quickly. Once they realize you've discovered their weakness, they'll retaliate in force." Ilara's heart raced. The Vithari were powerful, but they were not invincible. With this new information, they might have a fighting chance. "Do you think we can defeat them?" Ilara asked, her voice resolute. "We're not talking about defeating them in a conventional sense," the human woman said. "We're talking about proving that you're worth the Vithari's time. We're talking about showing them that humanity won't go down without a fight." Ilara straightened. "We're ready. We won't back down." The next few hours were a blur of preparations. Ilara and her fleet received the Resistance's technology, a set of modifications designed to disrupt the Vithari's energy field. The equipment was crude by their standards, but it was their best chance. The Vithari had shown no signs of aggression, but Ilara knew that they couldn't wait any longer. The longer they did, the more likely the Vithari would decide to end humanity's existence for good. The fleet was launched, every ship equipped with the new technology. Ilara stood at the helm of the Courageous, her heart pounding. She could feel the weight of the responsibility pressing down on her. But she refused to let fear control her. She was a captain, and captains led their people into battle. As the fleet neared the Vithari's massive ships, the tension in the air was thick. Ilara's thoughts raced. What would happen when they activated the disruptors? Would the Vithari retaliate? Would their gambit succeed? But there was no turning back. Humanity had no choice but to fight. They had come too far to give up now. "On my mark," Ilara said, her voice firm and steady. "Ready, Captain," Joran replied. "Now," she commanded. The fleet activated the disruptors, sending a pulse of energy that collided with the Vithari's cloaking field. For a moment nothing happened. And then the ships began to shimmer, becoming visible once more. The stars, blocked by their massive shadows, flickered back into view. The Vithari's ships were revealed, hundreds of them, massive and menacing, hovering just outside the atmosphere. Humanity had made its first move, and the fight for survival had begun. The moment the Vithari's fleet became visible in the skies, a wave of relief and dread washed over Captain Ilara Hayes. For a brief moment, the black void above them was filled with the outlines of massive, sleek ships, shimmering in the eerie light of the distant stars. Humanity's fleet, now equipped with the Resistance's technology, had succeeded in breaking the Vithari's cloaking field. But as the enormity of the situation set in, Ilara realized that their victory over the Vithari's shadow was just the beginning. "All ships ready for battle," Ilara commanded, her voice steady but filled with resolve. "We've exposed their fleet. Now we show them that humanity will not fall quietly." Her fingers gripped the command console of the Courageous as she watched the holographic display of the battle. The Vithari ships were massive, their shapes angular and intimidating, and they were surrounded by an aura of otherworldly power. But the Courageous and the other ships in the fleet were not alone. The Resistance forces, who had offered their technology and knowledge, had joined the fight alongside humanity's own ships, creating a united front that had never been seen before in the galaxy. "Captain, we're receiving a communication from the Vithari fleet," Joran said, his voice tight with tension. "They're demanding our surrender. They say our resistance is futile." Ilara clenched her jaw. "Tell them we'll never surrender." "Understood," Joran replied, his fingers moving swiftly over the communication panel. He responded, his message clear. "We are not your slaves. We will not bow to you." The holographic display flickered as the Vithari ships responded, their massive forms looming over the planet like an unstoppable storm. The message from Threx, the leader of the Vithari, came through once more, cold and emotionless. "You have made your choice. But know this, your fate is sealed. Your species will either evolve into something worthy, or we will erase your existence from the galaxy, as we have done with so many others before you." The transmission ended abruptly, but the words lingered in the air like a chilling warning. The Vithari had made their intentions clear. This was not just a battle, it was a trial. Humanity was being judged. "Prepare the fleet," Ilara said, her voice sharp with determination. "We don't need their approval. We need to show them the strength of humanity's spirit." As the first salvo of weapons fire shot out from the Vithari ships, Ilara's mind focused. The battle was upon them. The massive Vithari fleet had begun to unleash their advanced weaponry, blasts of energy that tore through space like bolts of lightning. The Courageous and the other ships in humanity's fleet swiftly returned fire, their weapons bright and fierce but far less powerful than the Vithari's. Still, they fought back with everything they had. Ilara stood at the helm of the Courageous, watching as the battle unfolded before her. The ships of the Resistance moved with incredible precision, coordinating with the human fleet to create a defensive perimeter around Arendor. The sound of explosions and the hum of laser fire filled the air, and the stars themselves seemed to burn brighter in the heat of the conflict. "We're holding them off, but they're relentless," Joran reported, his eyes scanning the displays as he tracked enemy movements. "Their shields are far stronger than ours. We need to find a way to break through." Ilara knew that they couldn't keep this up forever. The Vithari had the advantage, and the longer the battle lasted, the more likely it was that they would overpower humanity's fleet. But there was one thing the Vithari hadn't counted on: humanity's unwillingness to give up. "Keep pushing forward," Ilara commanded. "We may not have their technology, but we have something they don't: the will to fight. Show them what we're made of." Hours passed as the battle raged on, and Alara's nerves were on edge. She had never faced a threat like this before. The Vithari were not just powerful. They were ancient, and their ships seemed to bend the very fabric of space itself. But despite their overwhelming might, the human fleet refused to back down. Then, just as the battle seemed to be reaching its breaking point, a sudden burst of energy lit up the sky, a wave of power that crackled through the fleet like a shockwave. The disruptor technology designed to break the Vithari's energy field had worked. The Vithari ships flickered for a moment, their cloaking shield dissipating. "Now," Ilara shouted. In that moment, the human fleet, along with the resistance forces, launched their counterattack. They focused their firepower on the weakened Vithari ships, pouring everything they had into the enemy fleet. The stars above Arendor seemed to burn brighter with each blast, each explosion lighting up the dark void of space. But just as victory seemed within reach, something unexpected happened. A ripple of energy, unlike anything they had ever encountered, washed over the battlefield. The Vithari ships pulsed with an unearthly glow, and Alara realized with horror that they were preparing for something far more devastating. "Captain," Yoren shouted, "they're activating some kind of energy weapon. It's going to destroy everything in its path." Ilara's eyes widened as she watched the Vithari ships charge up their massive weapon. The energy began to swell, its power growing exponentially. If they didn't act fast, the Vithari would erase humanity's fleet and Arendor itself from existence. "We have to stop them," Ilara cried. "Is there anything left in our arsenal?" Joran's fingers flew across the console, searching for a solution. "We have one last chance. It's a risky move, but if we can hit their energy source directly, we might be able to disrupt the weapon before it fires." Ilara hesitated for a moment, weighing the decision. If they failed, they would lose everything. But if they didn't try, humanity would be lost for good. "Do it," Ilara ordered. "We have no choice." The crew of the Courageous worked quickly, activating the remaining experimental weapons. The ship's engines roared as they surged forward toward the Vithari fleet, charging straight toward the source of the weapon's energy. As they closed the distance, the energy weapon of the Vithari glowed brighter, its power almost blinding. But just as it seemed ready to unleash its full force, Ilara gave the order. "Now, Joran, fire everything we have!" With a deafening roar, the Courageous fired its entire arsenal, a massive barrage of energy and plasma aimed directly at the Vithari's weapon. The explosion was immense, lighting up the battlefield like a second sun. For a moment, everything went silent. Then the shockwave of the blast rippled through space, knocking out several Vithari ships. The weapon that had threatened to destroy Arendor was disabled. But the battle wasn't over. The Vithari ships, though damaged, were still formidable. Ilara knew that the Vithari wouldn't give up so easily. They would retaliate. But for the first time in hours, humanity had a glimmer of hope. "We've done it," Joran said, his voice filled with disbelief. But Ilara was already looking ahead, her gaze fixed on the remaining Vithari ships. "It's not over yet. We have to finish what we started. We'll show them that humanity won't go down without a fight." As the Courageous and the other ships in the fleet moved in for the final strike, Ilara's heart burned with determination. The Vithari had tried to erase humanity from the stars, but the human spirit was stronger than anything they could comprehend. The stars might have burned that day, but they would never be snuffed out. The galaxy was not theirs to claim, and humanity would never bow to anyone. The fight for Arendor and for the future of humanity was far from over. But now they were ready to face whatever came next, and they would do it together.